Since the Industrial Revolution, American companies and private individuals have developed many products that have struggled to solve their society's problems. No surprises here, considering the personal consumption expenditures represented nearly 68% of the nation's gross domestic product in Q1 of 2024. However, some seemingly great ideas have taken several years to develop and only flopped in the American market. Some of these ideas deserve to fail because they were downright ridiculous, but others were the victims of industrial factors. Here are 17 such products that Americans did not receive with open arms. We will begin with the HP Touchpad. The HP Touchpad was a most disappointing product. When its launch was teased, Americans, especially tech and smartphone enthusiasts, widely anticipated the magic it would bring to the smartphone industry. To understand the disappointment that followed the launch of this touchpad, let's meddle into its backstory. Say hello to Palm, a phone company notorious for making faulty phones. Most of its phones wobbled because of the poor design of its software, and its phones never really beat the market. Well, in 2010, HP bought Palm. When the news hit the market, eyebrows rose in surprise. HP was a well-known phone company with a few notable phones like the iPay H3610 and the iPay HW6915. Something was coming. Americans could smell it, especially since HP was struggling to produce a tablet that could beat Apple's iPad. Their first attempt was a colossal flop. The device was unnecessarily large and ugly, and it was also quite slow to use. Users also struggled to update apps. Palm's attempt at a touchpad was even better since their WebOS was seemingly perfect for tablets with its gesture-based interface and its powerful card-based multitasking and scalable UI that was flexible in a way that neither iOS or iPad or even Android 2.3 was. So this was a rich phone company buying out an innovative one. Everyone bit their lip in anticipation of the results. Finally, in February 2011, HP held an event tagged Think Big, Think Small, Think Beyond, and launched their new product, the HP Touchpad. The room was filled to the brim with tech influencers and enthusiasts, and they couldn't wait to see it. Unfortunately, they couldn't. Even after the launch, the touchpad took 4 months to hit the market. Well, 4 months was enough for a faster, slimmer, and better iPad 2 to launch and steal the public's heart. So even though the HP Touchpad came with Bluetooth, a cleaning cloth, an AC charger, a micro USB cable, Beats Audio, a 1.3 megapixel camera, a 1.2 gig dual-core processor, and 32 gigs of storage, it couldn't hold a torch beside the new iPad. To harden its losing battle, it was also extremely buggy and didn't have as many apps as its competitor, yet its price was also high. The two tablets were priced at $499. Of course, the HP Touchpad was a huge flop, and HP's new CEO at the time, Leo Apotheca, discontinued it after just 49 days on sale. Touchpad accounted for only 17% of the 1.2 million non-Apple tablets sold in the United States between January and October, which was terribly poor for a device that planned to stand out as iPad's competition. But Apple sold a startling 11.12 million iPads in the last quarter alone. Well, let's move to a more disappointing product, Facebook Home. This was software designed to turn your Android phone into a Facebook phone. It was launched on April 4, 2013 and cost $99.99. If you are confused, don't worry, millions of Americans were at launched. Some wondered, isn't the app enough? Well, Facebook didn't think it was. Our guess is they wanted people quite addicted to their app. Facebook Home's software basically consists of 2 parts: a custom launcher and a lock screen that puts your Facebook feed in your face. It also introduced a new thing called chat heads. It is 2024, so of course you know how chat heads work. Every update in your news feed was used as a background for your home and lock screen. It even collapsed the lock and home screen into one. This design pushed users to swipe through Facebook updates often, which was their aim. But think about it, imagine the weird posts made by your Facebook friends being smack on your lock screen. This means even posted porn could appear on your home screen because it was posted by a friend on Facebook. Think of the number of weird updates you would have to hide from your family. As if it wasn't ridiculous enough, anyone could like or comment on posts showing on your home or lock screen without needing to input a password. Whose idea was that? This idea was good for Facebook junkies, not normal people. Its interface was also too complicated that it took many steps to dial a number, which is the primary function of a phone. It was so complicated that it was hard to find apps, and there were no shortcuts, not even to a camera. Even uploading a Facebook picture needed too many steps, which was a terrible creative design for software designed just for Facebook. Well, this flopped. Americans decided that they didn't need a whole phone to do what an app can do. Just a few hours after release, It had already received an average review of 2.3 out of 5 on Google Play. One product that should have done better is the Nook, the Nook First Edition. The Nook was the brainchild of Barnes & Noble. If you are in America and you have never heard of this popular bookstore chain, you must have been born within the year. This bookstore chain opened in 1917, and it soon became the world's largest bookstore chain. They had thousands of stores throughout the country. Some of these stores are now closed. The Nook was Barnes & Noble's last attempt to save their crashing store. The bookstore chain peaked in 2012 when they exceeded $1 billion in revenue because their rival, Borders, filed for bankruptcy and their flock of customers ran to them instead. Unfortunately, what hit Border finally hit Barnes & Noble, online retailers. Before the internet, everyone read hard copy books. But with the internet, ebooks have become the choicest option. And so arose another competitor, Amazon. Amazon was taking B&N's customers with its Kindle, and by February 2018, B&N laid off 1,800 employees. Amazon's first cross with Barnes & Noble happened when the older bookstores sued them for claiming to be the world's largest bookstore. Well, Amazon finally won the war with their Kindle in 2007. Barnes & Noble's refused to accept defeat and responded in 2009 with their Nook, which they poured millions into. It cost $259. The first edition of the Nook was an e-book reader, the first with both free and fast 3G wireless access to a vast digital library. It also allowed readers to share their purchased books with friends, just like they could with hard copies. Unfortunately, this was not enough to defeat the Kindle. The Nook was buggy and hard to get used to. The touchscreen was poor, and people considered the price too high. Amazon's Kindle sold for $399, while the Nook sold for only $259 yet. The Nook's sales plummeted while Amazon's Kindle sold out within 5 hours of its release, and by 2013, they had already recorded 4.5 billion sales. Microsoft had to invest $300 million trying to make it more relevant, but even they did not succeed. However, Barnes & Noble are not the only popular American company with terrible innovative ideas. The LG G8 ThinQ, this weirdly named phone, released in 2019. Isn't it interesting that a large and well-known tech company like LG struggles to replicate their success in smartphones? LG produced phones that flopped over and over again until they finally closed their smartphone division in defeat. Well, before they did, they released the LG G8 ThinQ in 2019, but they shouldn't have. Good phones need to stand out in the market, especially when compared to rivals. Why should anyone buy the LG G8 ThinQ and not the Samsung? A number of phones constantly fail this common test. The LG G8 ThinQ is one of them. How did it fail? Firstly, it had a very long and forgettable name. And just like its name, it had no standout features, so it couldn't beat its rival, Samsung. The LG G8 ThinQ had a bright, sharp screen, a second wide-angle rear camera, and a fast processor. It was also water-resistant and had a headphone jack, which was admittedly rare. But the phone's touch-less hand controls were annoying to use, and portrait mode for video wasn't very smooth. Its Hand ID didn't work as fast as the Face Unlock or the fingerprint scanner, and you needed to hover your hand at just the right spot for it to register. Air motion didn't work immediately either. Its front-facing camera paled even in comparison to that of the Samsung. Its front camera was 8 megapixels while its competitor's camera was 10. Consumers sensibly did not pick it over Samsung. Even with this failure, it was so expensive, costing between $820 and $850, while its competitor, the Samsung Galaxy S10e, cost only $750. But LG tried to save face one last time. LG rollable smartphone. LG did have many innovative ideas. Their creative ideas made such a big impact on the smartphone ecosystem that it was always adopted. In March 2007, LG product came out with the first capacitive touchscreen, and now almost all smartphones have one. In 2010, LG Optimus 2X was the first dual-core processor smartphone and the first to do 1080p video recording. In 2011, LG Optimus 3D was the first phone with more than one rear camera. The LG G2 was the first phone to need a double tap to wake a phone screen. They called it the knock-knock feature. They even tried a curved phone and a phone with a self-healing back that was so sturdy that scratches just couldn't reflect. But they never broke even, so they shut down their smartphone business in 2021. Well, they tried one last time. More than a year after LG exited the smartphone business, they released a lengthy video showing their unreleased device, LG's rollable smartphone. This video showed off the phone's design and features from every angle. The device was shown in near final retail packaging. The screen measured 7.4 inches corner to corner while fully extended and shrunk down to 6.8 inches when rolled. The unrolling mechanism looked similar to the Oppo X 2021 concept phone, but in the case of the LG, there's also a visible display on the back of the device. The phone finally came out in 2022. This phone was as disappointing as the rest and also flopped. Why did LG keep getting it wrong? Bulky names, forgettable marketing, and lack of phone personality were some of the reasons. They marketed their phones like they marketed other appliances like their washing machine. They were also slow in delivering software updates and never stood out against their competition. Expert Americans called them jack of all trades but master of none. But there is another phone company that has refused to cut their losses: Sony Xperia 1. Sony released the Sony Xperia 1 in May 2019 for movie creators, but from the moment it dropped, it was full of problems. It was just a terrible product. Its 4G dropped in and out often, and the fingerprint sensor failed regularly. The phone was always overheating, and calls ended on their own. It had a weak signal and even jumped to airplane mode at intervals. But what shocked Americans more was its camera. Sony is one of the few smartphone makers that also makes cinema-quality cameras. They even build camera sensors in almost every phone. So why was the Xperia 1's camera so terrible? Sony's smartphones used to be the best in the market, but their recent productions have failed. In recent years, they've had an almost 0% market share in the smartphone market. Their sales dropped from 39.1 in 2014 to 6.5 in 2018, and have fallen from 40 million a year, 2 years in a row, to 6.5 million. That's about as many as the iPhone sells in a week. For one thing, their naming system is quite poor. They went from Xperia 10 to Xperia S to Xperia 2 to Xperia Z, all uncreative names without a pattern. They even went from Z1 to Z2, Z3 to Z3 Plus, then XZ. Then they went back to Xperia 1, and their next phone after that was the Sony Xperia 1 II. It makes no sense. Sony became relevant because they found something that worked, but they made a terrible mistake. Instead of improving on their idea, they began producing the same phones every year. Soon they began to look outdated, and users became bored. In comparison to its competitor, the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip, the Xperia only had 9 advantages, but the Samsung had 23. Where the Samsung had an 8 gig internal space, the Xperia 1 had only 6 gig. The Samsung even had a 10 megapixel front camera, while the Xperia had only 8 megapixel. The Xperia 1 also operated with an Android 11, while the Galaxy Z Flip was already on the Android 14. Even the company's PR strategy was poor. The Xperia 1 was announced in May 2019, but influencers received it in November, 6 months later. As it stands, many people still don't know this phone ever existed. However, when it comes to large companies with huge losses, there are still many others on our list, like Uber. Uber's Jump electric bikes. Jump was founded 14 years ago, but Uber bought it out in April 2018 for a reported $200 million. It was such a good and innovative idea at first. Having bikes replace cars would clean up the ecosystem and even reduce noise pollution in America. Each Jump bike had a 250-watt electric motor, which powered the front wheel, and in December 2018, they even announced plans to update their bikes with new features including a front computer and a swappable battery. Jump bicycles were red and shiny and even depended on e-technology. However, they flopped. Why? Former employees told Business Insider why they put Rachel Holt in, and she had no idea how to run a hardware company. She ran it into the ground. Maybe due to terrible management, the Jump did very badly. Jump Bike's creator and some other founding members left Uber in January, and just shortly after, footage surfaced on the internet of tens of thousands of the red-colored machines being disposed of. But their management was not their only problem. Jump struggled with technical and political difficulties. They were banned in Atlanta after dark because of fatal accidents where drivers killed scooters and bike riders. Then, disability advocates protested because owners parked their Jump bicycles haphazardly. Uber reported a $1.3 billion operating loss in the second quarter of 2019, but it is still unclear if Jump's failure had anything to do with that gross loss. Well, it probably did because Uber immediately transferred the Jumpy bike and scooter business to Lime in May 2020. Another large company on our list is Google Pixel 4. Don't be surprised, Google, the company that runs the internet, makes phones too. But did you know that they make poor phones? The Google Pixel 4 is just one of their innovative fails, and we will still see others in this video. Most of Google's phones feel like an experiment. For example, the Pixel 5 and Google 7 have all failed. Google Pixel 4 looked promising. It was launched in 2019 and had IP68 water resistance and even stereo speakers, but it also lacked a lot. It had no fingerprint sensor, only face recognition, and could easily be unlocked by someone holding the phone to your face. The battery performance was manageable but not good enough. It was waterproof but not dirt-proof, and didn't even come with a headphone jack. Its price wasn't even worth it. It cost as much as $799, but had only 64 GB and lacked a microSD card slot. Its battery bloated often, which caused charging issues. Chrome froze often. Screen attention was not working, and rebooting and toggling the feature off and on made no difference. The camera app also crashed often. Uninstalling and reinstalling did nothing to address the issue. It's needless comparing this phone to another, as it simply didn't stand a chance. Speaking of really ridiculous products by popular companies, the Nintendo Labo takes the cup. The Nintendo Labo. This was quite a ridiculous product. It was a game made with cardboard. Nintendo released this game in 2018 with a bold face. Kids were supposed to use the cardboards to build fun things like a piano and a crane. On the surface, it might have seemed like fun. Think of a bunch of construction toy sets bundled together, with a video game that immediately made them interactive. Fun, right? Wrong. Labo was a gimmick. Unfortunately, it was also a very expensive gimmick. The retail prices for the Variety Kit and Robot Kit were $69.99 and $59.99 respectively. $70 for cardboard. Not only was it too expensive, it was also too tasking for kids. The piano set took 3 hours for an adult to put together, and the robot set took 8 hours. Imagine how long a kid would take. And it had absolutely no replay value. Who would want to go through those excruciating hours again? The novelty usually wore off after the items were built, and soon, Labos found themselves in the closet and the basement, sometimes even in the fire. It must have been a brilliant idea on paper, but the execution was not thought out. The finishing was terrible too. In the end, Nintendo shut down the Labo page, and LaboNintendo.com now redirects to the regular store page. Ironically, it sold 1 million units in its first year. But in comparison, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate sold 12 million units in its first month. While Nintendo released this nonsense, Sony and Microsoft were also releasing new gaming devices that offered more gaming options. Well, failure is not a new concept to Nintendo. Their gaming experiments hit the jackpot sometimes, other times they just flop. But, just maybe, if they had put some effort into marketing this Labo game, it wouldn't have done so poorly. So once it was discarded, no one remembered to return to it. Well, let's take a short break from popular companies. Uber is not the only company to fail at managing a bike company. One unknown company almost slipped past our radar: Segway PT. Segway was a two-wheeled, self-balancing personal transporter device invented by Dean Kamen and unveiled in 2001. Unfortunately, it looked like it was for dorks. It probably was, and that was enough to water down its specs. It was a good device. Its maximum speed was 12.5 miles per hour, 20.1 kilometers per hour, and it could cover 24 miles, 39 kilometers when fully charged, depending on the terrain and the owner's riding style. It seemed very good on paper until users saw its sale price, $5,000. This was way too much for middle-class consumers. Anyway, some rich Americans bought it, but in September 2003, the Segway PT was recalled. Why? There were just too many accidents. Once the battery dropped, the wheels shut down. You can still find footage of President George Bush crashing and falling from the device on the internet. The company had to recall the first 6,000 models. It was supposed to make an estimated 100,000 sales in its first year, but they only sold 140,000 modules in its entire lifespan, which was 20 years. That was quite a loss. They tried their hands with new models and better charging time, but it was too late. Americans had already associated the Segway with dorky falls. Even using it in a movie, Mall Cop, did not help at all. Segway PT was later sold in 2009 to British Jimmy Hazelden, but things only got more interesting. Jimmy tragically died just 10 months later by driving one of the Segway off the cliff. One of its many accidents even involved Usain Bolt in 2015, when an official on the wheel hit him from behind after he won the 200 meters run. This was one huge fail that was ironically not the fault of the producers. One like this should be Google+. Google+. We promised more Google innovative failures. Well, here is one. Google+ was a social media app that connected people together, just like Facebook. It was created in 2011, but it entered into a very saturated market and even tried to compete with Facebook. Google+ did have many creative ideas. They introduced circles that some social media platforms now use. On Circles, you could share specific information with a specific group of people, but Google+ execution was terrible and unattractive. Still, by the end of 2011, 90 million users had signed up to Google+. This should be a win, right? It wasn't. For one, 800 million people had signed up for Facebook, and most of those signed to Google were bloggers who were forced to sign in. To worsen Google fate, it had a cumbersome layout and its menus were too confusing to navigate. After it shut down, it was discovered that most Google+ sessions lasted for only 5 seconds, which meant people only opened it by mistake. This was not Google's first try at a social media app. Their first try was Orkut, which opened almost the same time Facebook did. Unfortunately, there was a terrible security breach and passwords and banking details were leaked. That leak spelt the end of Orkut. They tried Google Friend Connect, then treat a Google Buzz where they immediately added anyone you ever shared an email with. Google+ was their next try. Google did everything to save it. In 2013, they even made it compulsory for viewers on YouTube to create a Google+ account if they wanted to like or comment. At last, Google Plus also suffered 2 data breaches. Private info of over 50 million users was leaked to third-party developers. After its second leak, they finally gave up. The site was finally closed in 2019. Well, in that same year, another flop was born: Amazon Echo Loop. Arising from the technological manger in 2019 was the Loop, a smart ring just like the smartwatch. It was like having Alexa wrapped around your finger. You could activate Alexa by simply tapping a button, and you could ask anything. You could ask Alexa to answer questions, set reminders, create to-do and shopping lists, get directions and weather reports, control connected smart home devices, make calls, and lots more. You could even summon more than one AI assistant. Alexa, if you prefer her, or Siri. And you didn't even have to reach for your phone. The Loop had 2 microphones and a tiny built-in speaker. This all sounds so cool, right? Well, this device was an epic fail. Why? Well, the Loop costs $129.99. For a device with a price that high, some features failed to work. It was also too bulky to carry around, especially on smaller fingers. Amazon even warned against wearing it while swimming and showering, and against exposing it to food, oil, sunscreen, cosmetics, detergents, solvents, and sanitizers. Too many things to be conscious of while wearing the ring. Or to worsen it, its audio was quite low, and its battery life very poor. Americans did not think it was worth the hassle. They did not think Google Stadia was worth the hassle either. Google Stadia. Did you know that Google has a website where they keep track of all their innovative failures? Google Stadia made their list, so it made ours. It was a cloud gaming service introduced in October 2018 and publicly launched in November 2019. Stadia was accessible through Chromecast Ultra and Android TV devices, on personal computers, Chromebooks and tablets, and the Stadia mobile app on supported Android devices. There was also an experimental mode with support for all Android devices that could install the Stadia mobile app. Well, what happened to this game software? Poor marketing happened to it. To introduce it, Google released a flimsy ad that explained nothing. The funny ad skipped over specs to focus on silly issues like space, claiming that their game would help save home space, which didn't make any sense at all. They even advertised that it could be played with a console, which was such a basic thing to advertise for a modern game. Google seemed clueless about the product they were marketing and what people could gain from buying, and this was quite suspicious. According to Mark Long, former head of cloud at Microsoft and publishing, you do not get in your car and drive to the store to buy an Xbox. You go out to buy Halo, to buy the experience of Halo. It's not about the technology, it's about the games. Google needed to market that experience, but they couldn't. For those who were still curious enough to play, they soon realized that the games lagged badly. So even though Stadia supported 4000 resolution and 60 FPS with HDR, it became one of Google's many failed adventures. New insights say that Stadia folded because of a lack of content and less than ideal technology infrastructure. Well, according to findings from the CMA, Google Stadia had less than 5% cloud gaming market share in 2022. By comparison, Microsoft's cloud gaming software, Xbox Cloud Gaming, had a 60 to 70% share of the cloud gaming market in 2022. But Google still has more medals on their jackets. Google Clips. Google proved that they know the importance of a good pitch with their Google Clips. Imagine you're hanging out with your kids or pets, and they suddenly do something interesting or cute. You struggle for your phone, but before you find it, you're too late. The moment has passed, and you've missed the opportunity to capture it. Well, that is what Google Clips aimed to solve. It was a small camera which cost $249 that used artificial intelligence to automatically capture all the in-between moments. It was meant to capture your toddler's silly laugh or your cat jumping over a window without requiring you to take the picture. Now, you could spend time with your kids without fiddling with a phone or camera. It was introduced in 2018, and it came with built-in machine learning that could recognize the people who matter most to us and decide the best moments to capture. Now, that was a great idea, but it still failed. Why? For one thing, clips were too bulky to carry, and they weren't designed to be clipped onto clothes. Besides, only few trusted Google enough to allow a device monitoring their every move to stay around them. At least not after all the data breaches Google has been known for. It was also creepy to have around kids. While some people did indulge, but they later regretted it. Consumers complained that after a long day, the moments they hoped were captured never were, and then they wished they had whipped out their phones. Out of hundreds of videos, only a couple of dozens lived up to the hype. It seemed like such a waste of money. Actually, it was. Well, according to Sensor Tower, the camera's app was downloaded about 15,000 times, so the sales must have been somewhere around these numbers. Even though Google announced its decision to discontinue the product in October 2019, it must have been able to recover a bit of its revenue from the sales. This is something Cheetos might wish to say. Be prepared for what you're going to hear next. Cheetos lip balm. This is yet another ridiculous product. In fact, it is hard to understand what the company aimed to achieve with this product. Smart men and women filled a large conference room and thought up the most ridiculous idea. What idea? Well, for several reasons unknown to many, Americans Cheetos, the crunchy and delicious snack, decided to introduce a lip balm to make it even more interesting. This balm came in the flavor of the popular snack. This was the innovation the company expected America to receive with open arms. However, they were soon shocked when their idea backfired. It was common sense to know that this would flop, but somehow, even that had eluded them. The company assumed that people who loved Cheetos would want a product that smelt and tasted like cheese, a product that could solve dry lips and satisfy their cravings all at once. While many consumers could not accept the concept of snack-flavored balms on their lips and completely avoided the product, Cheetos tried a few marketing gimmicks before finally pulling it out from the shelves and discontinuing production. People who did try this product found another problem. Putting cheese on your lips all the time only made you thirsty, but once your thirst was quenched, the balm was gone, making you reapply only to be thirsty again. Cheetos lip balm is a good example of what happens when you fail to understand the needs and wants of consumers before creating a product. Research is always important. Speaking of food and snack companies, McDonald's has had a few failures up their sleeves too. Mighty Wings. Sometimes we imagine that an idea is good and only needs a different audience or season. McDonald's must have thought the same. Their Mighty Wings was first introduced in 1990, but had to be removed from the menu in 2003. Well, in September 2013, they decided to try again. We imagine they studied the market and found something that convinced them it would be a hit this time. Whatever they saw was terribly deceiving. In fact, executives were so sure they had success on their hands that McDonald's stocked up on 50 million pounds of the product. But were they wrong? The wings didn't sell, forcing McDonald's to remove them from the menu and dispose of 10 million pounds of leftovers in December 2013. What a huge waste. But what caused this? The problem was both the pricing and the spicing. The Mighty Wings were sold for $1 per wing. McDonald's CEO Don Thompson pointed out the price in a competitive market as part of the reason. Consumers didn't like how spicy it was. McDonald did not give up. They tried it again in 2016 all over Atlanta. For some reason, that was the last we heard of it. It is only fitting that we end our video with a product from the one company that dominated this video. Google Glass. Google Glass was a brand of smart glasses developed and sold by Google. It was released in 2011 with over $29.3 billion in revenue in Google's secretive Google X laboratory. Everything about it sounds so secretive and cool. To add to the air of mystery, Google offered the prototype to only a few thousand explorers, and they had to go through an application process. They even had to pay too. Each glass explorer paid $1,500 to test the prototype. The glass was met with high anticipation. Celebrities tried it in public, and tech magazines even called it a great invention. However, it wasn't long before users reported software bugs and privacy concerns were raised, as is usual with Google. Well, imagine the shock when Google announced it would discontinue Glass. The New York Times reported that the product's imperfections were already known within the company even before its launch. Could Google have wanted a cash grab? We might never know. So in case we managed to grab your attention, do hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like, share, and comment, and let us know if you want another part to this video. See you in the next video.